The latest John Wick film, Ballerina, dropped in theaters. I was able to see it last night. Here are my thoughts on it. Hi, my name is Nathan, and I like to talk about a lot of movies on this channel. If you're new here, down below in the comment section, share what you thought of Ballerina over on my channel. I have more content like this. Check those out once this video is over. And if you enjoyed this video, click the like button and be sure to subscribe because that really does help a lot. And with all that said, let's just get straight into the review talking about the good. And when it comes to me and the John Wick franchise, I am a massive fan of the John Wick franchise. I've enjoyed all 4 films, and even the Continental TV show I enjoyed a little bit. So, naturally, I was very excited to watch this movie. And this movie's plot basically follows a girl, Eve Macarro, who is out for revenge against somebody for killing her father when she was young. Very simple concept. As a film, it kind of is like the original in its plot and everything like that, where in the first one, John Wick is a guy whose wife died and is out for revenge against the ones who killed his dog. And so that there was a very simple plot with the first one, and it had so much world building going on to it, so much intrigue that led to this big franchise. And this one is very much kind of reminiscent of the original. It's not, I wouldn't say it's as good as the original, but it does have a little bit more of that world building, is fleshing out some of the smaller elements of the John Wick universe, and I'd say it does that quite well. What I mean by it fleshes out some of the smaller John Wick elements is that this movie is a spin-off of John Wick 3, and there's this ballerina school in John Wick 3 for assassins that we briefly get a glimpse at but never fully explore in that film. And in this movie, it's set during and after the events of John Wick 3, where we explore more of that school called the Ruska Roma and how they tie in and how they have this treaty with this sort of other assassin cult that Eve is trying to go after. And it fleshes out those elements a little bit, expands the world just a little bit more, and to make it feel more populated. And what I enjoyed about this film also is that because you already know so much of the world, it very much feels like an area populated all over the place with assassins. And with all those assassins, it always has just great action sequences as you would expect from a John Wick film. This is a franchise that kind of changed the game in a way for stunt work and action sequences, and this film absolutely contains all the John Wick style stunt work, action sequences, choreography. All of that is very much present in this movie, and we probably get the most non-stop action sequences in this film, because in this film it goes from action set piece to action set piece to action set piece. It just never stops at delivering all the John Wick carnage and action that you expect from this movie. And because of that, I would say it moves at a very nice pace and it never bores. It's loud, it's energetic, and it never fails to entertain you. And because you love the John Wick world, because there are some exciting, large, and memorable action sequences, it's a movie that is just easy for a person like me to watch as somebody that enjoys action movies and the John Wick movies. And what the action sequences do in this film in particular is that they utilize, like, each action sequence is memorable in their own way. They utilize the setting, they utilize the weapons that they use, and I think all the action is choreographed very well. There's a particular one involving grenades that I thoroughly enjoyed. In fact, grenades are used quite a bit in this movie, but there's a particular action sequence in the middle of this movie with grenades that I thought was very, very well done. And near the end of it, in the final battle, they're using like flamethrowers, and it just feels such like a production that doesn't need to rely on CGI or anything like that. These are practical stunt works, practical action sequences, and they're filming on actual sets, so it just is given this visceral style to it, the way that the other John Wick movies are filmed. And I also thought that Ana de Armas did a good job of playing Eve Macarro in this movie. And while I don't find her as interesting as John Wick, we'll get into that later on in the bad, but I did think she delivered a good performance where you're able to connect with her character and you care about the journey that she's on and everything like that. And so for me, I just thought that this movie absolutely was a very good spin-off, or a good spin-off to the John Wick franchise. I hear a lot of people saying it's just as good as John Wick and are really high on it and everything like that. I wouldn't go that far, so let's move on to the bad. And this is something that in the bad category, I don't know if I didn't watch it in the right set of mind or if everybody was just excited about it, but I had more issues with this movie than most people did. And I'm not saying that the movie is bad or anything. I enjoyed the film. I thought this was a good film. But there were some things that I didn't like about it. Now, with many action movies, you could probably pick on them for the unbelievable. You have to suspend some disbelief on some of them. But here, I think I noticed it here more than the other John Wick movies. There are less believable action sequences. I mentioned earlier the action sequence with a bunch of grenades, where a bunch of grenades are being used against a bunch of bad guys. Thoroughly enjoy that sequence. And then later on, when grenades are inflicted upon our heroes, it's given a little bit of plot armor where they're able to easily survive all of this. And there are things like that where you just have to suspend some disbelief. Likewise, you'll get a Eve facing off 50 men with armed machine guns, and then they each go up to her one at a time and don't really fire their guns, and sometimes in some cases even throw away their guns in order to engage in hand-to-hand combat with her. There are things like that I wasn't crazy about, but it's an action movie. You have to come to expect that. You have to suspend some disbelief, and because the choreography, because the action sequences stood out, because it was never boring and it would just kept on entertaining you, that didn't distract me all that much. But I will say I did notice that in this movie more so than other John Wick movies, and there was a motorcycle outside just right now. Also, adding to the point earlier that I made, I don't think Eve is quite as interesting as John Wick. But I don't expect her to be as interesting as John Wick. She doesn't have to be. But she just isn't. You're following her around, you're invested in her character, but it's not the same feeling. It's not as immersive as the John Wick character. When it came to the John Wick character, it was a very simple story in the first one about his dog dies, he's angry, he's getting out for revenge, and you kind of learn more about him. But in that film, you get a scenario where each character realizes what they've done to John Wick and are scared when they hear his name. They immediately go, the main villain of it, he gets called, he's just hey, your son killed John Wick's dog and stole his car and things like that, and you see this immediate look of, he says, oh, and in the first one he just did such a good job of establishing, and there's this intrigue to the character about why is he so feared, what makes him this dangerous man that when his name is said is feared by all these people that are working in this business. And so there was just that intrigue here. There's just not that with Eve. She's not as intriguing of a character, thus I don't find her as interesting of a character, but I still think that Eve was a solid character, so that didn't bother me all that much. But what I didn't like about this movie, just genuinely didn't like about it, is that the antagonist here I don't think is as interesting as the other John Wick antagonists. I think of the films, he is probably the least interesting antagonist. I couldn't describe to you his personality. As a villain, he wasn't really all that intimidating to me. He wasn't really all that memorable, and so he just wasn't all that interesting to me. But I think the biggest problem here of this movie is how John Wick is in this movie. So you see John Wick in the trailers. This is not a spoiler, and he actually makes a couple separate appearances in this movie. Near the beginning of the movie, he appears in it for a little bit, and I was fine with that. He makes a couple different appearances. So one's near the beginning of the movie, and I was okay with the way they did that, and I thought that worked in the continuity of the franchise. But then when he appears later on in the film for a second time, I thought it kind of broke the continuity a little bit. This is in the continuity is set during and after John Wick 3, and the way they had him show up whenever he did his second appearance, I just didn't think fit in with the franchise. I thought it lost a little bit of continuity there. and it's never explained why he's there, because in this continuity, it shouldn't make any sense why he's there, but he is. But when he's there, it's very cool. He gets a nice little action sequence. It's always fun to see Keanu Reeves as John Wick, but it's never explained why he's there, and it doesn't make sense why he's there. There's also this subplot in the film about Eve's sister that I thought you could have just taken out and it would have changed absolutely nothing. To me, it was an absolutely pointless subplot. And so, overall, this film was a good movie. I enjoyed the action, I enjoyed the character, I enjoyed the pace that it moved at, and it never bored me at all. But when it comes to John Wick standards, I thought the story needed to be ironed out a little bit. They needed to explain some more things, and they maybe needed to take out some unnecessary plot points here. Maybe make our villain a little bit better. So while I thought this was a good movie, I'm not as crazy about it as most people are. Overall, I'm going to give it a B, but those are just my thoughts on the film. Down below in the comment section, share what you thought of Ballerina. Over on my channel, I have more content like this. Check those out when this video is over, which is right now. I don't know why I said that. Thank you guys so much for sticking out to the end. I'll see you in the next one.